Hello, beautifuls. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are live, and you are watching Pain to Power. I'm your host, Ava Love. I am also the founder and chief executive director of Tabula Rasa Domestic Violence. Pain to Power brings the conversation to you, so join us. Let us hear from you. Tell us your thoughts, your concerns, and your suggestions. So come on in and join the conversation. Hello, hello, beautifuls. I am your host, Ava Love, and I'm glad and welcome you all in today. I'm excited for you all to be here and to be able to have this conversation with you all today. It is a conversation that a lot of people stay away from, and that is the conversation of trauma. We talk about trauma, but we don't really have the conversation of trauma, not as a in-depth conversation. So I want to discuss a bit today. So sit back and join the conversation. I first want to give you all a definition of what trauma is. And trauma is when we experience very stressful, frightening, or distressing events that are difficult to cope with or out of control. It could be one incident or an ongoing event that happens over a long period of time. Most of us will experience an event in our lives that could be considered traumatic. And that is so true. For a moment, I want you all to take the time, log on, look at the phone numbers that you all see underneath, and go to the website, have a conversation, submit any questions that you may have. And once again, this conversation can be anonymous of what you would like. If there's some information that you would like to have or receive, or if there's anything that you might want to ask or discuss and don't want to put your information out there, you can do so anonymously. So join in on the conversation, whether it is anonymous or unanonymous. Okay. So once again, welcome for being here. Today, as I stated, I really want to discuss trauma. Trauma can have an effect on, it does have an effect on all of us, and it affects each individual differently. Everyone does not react the same in trauma, but it's so important that when we do experience trauma, that we are able to really self-advocate. But before you can get to self-advocating, you definitely want to be able to go through the process of healing. A lot of people think that when they experience trauma, that they're fine, that they don't need anyone to talk to or work through the process of it or even deal with the trauma at hand. They feel once they're out of it or away from individuals or situations that everything is fine, that they are able to move on with their lives and continue to thrive, and that doesn't happen. And a lot of times, those individuals may find themselves stuck or in a cycle, and it never ends. They are completely going in circles because of the fact that they have failed to understand and identify the trauma effect that has happened on their lives. So in discussing this thing about trauma, I want you all to just I don't want you to focus too much on anything else, but about the fact of really knowing how the trauma has interfered with your life or kept you from moving forward or being able to even discuss conversations or even how it has affected your relationship, whether it's been an intimate relationship or platonic relationship with someone, how it affects how you communicate, how you are able to even trust that individual or what they do or say, or even something, or what they even may say to you, or how they say it to you, on how it could trigger you. Um, Sometimes it could even just be the tone of an individual that can trigger someone. So and in doing that and understanding that trauma, as I say, it affects everyone differently. I want you to know that once you go through the process of speaking with someone and being able to have that conversation about what you have experienced and how it affects you. And you may not know in any specific clinical definition, but you know the feelings that you have and the emotions that you have when you're being triggered, or when you're being affected from that trauma. So being able to clearly discuss those things with a certified licensed therapist who will be able to assist you through that process. Now, therapy is not about someone coming to tell you everything, but it's to help you to be able to sort through that process of what you're going through. But it will also help you come to understanding that one, the trauma that you experienced did affect you, how it affected you, and how to be able to cope through that process when you are being triggered through the trauma that you have experienced from some, and it could be somebody else. That trauma, when you're triggered, it doesn't necessarily have to be the individual that you received the trauma or that caused the trauma. It could be someone else who could actually say something that was similar to, or do something, or it could be a smell, it could be a sound, it could be the presence of things. There are so many different things that could actually trigger an individual to take them back to that trauma. And when that individual is triggered, they respond in the manner of them actually being directly in that trauma at that time. So a lot of times when individuals are communicating and they are triggered, sometimes you may experience the fact of what the heck, you don't understand where they're coming from, or or even just the anger or the demeanor behind the conversation that they're having. And this is where it's important to become self-aware. When we have self-awareness, we are able to look at ourselves and understand what our own needs are, what our own boundaries, what we need to implement. And implementing healthy boundaries will safeguard you, will protect you from having to go into a situation where you are being triggered. And if you do so happen to come into that situation, then you do know how to implement the coping mechanisms that you will learn from a licensed therapist. And sometimes it's not therapy is not the only thing that some individuals may need. They may need some form of medication, but that doesn't mean that that's something that you will have to be on for a lifetime. But in understanding the trauma, the experience that the things that you are experiencing through that trauma, I want you to also understand that you have to that when you begin to heal, you will understand part of your healing is part of you having that self advocacy. You're being able to speak up, to talk about, hey, I don't want you to do XYZ because that is triggering to me. And it's important to be respectful of those things with those other individuals, as well as those individuals being respectful to you of the things that may trigger you as well. So it is definitely an understanding and a form of respect to clearly hear and receive what someone is saying to you, and to accept and respect that, so that you all can continue to have a healthy dialogue without it being a triggering and unhealthy situation. But here we come with a thing of unresolved trauma. Hmm. unresolved trauma when we feel like we're okay. I always use the song by Mary J. Blige where she say, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. But sometimes everybody will think that they're fine, but it's okay not to be fine. And we are really coming into an age in society where individuals are becoming aware, self-aware, and being able to communicate, what is going on. But we need to do it even more so, especially within our own families, before we even get on the outside and with ourselves, to know that whatever you're going through, when something happens, to say, I'm not okay. But when you don't resolve, you don't want to have that conversation, you can't sweep your trauma under the rug and then think that you can build or have a healthy relationship, whether it be a platonic relationship or an intimate relationship, and think that at some point in time that trauma is not going to resurface in your life. It will resurface. And sometimes at the most inopportune time, the times that you're not even ready for it to surface, the time of when you are least expected for it to surface, it will surface. And that's why it's so important to resolve it. But when you don't address it and you continue to walk and move in your life, you continue to keep yourself at a standstill because in your mind, you are still in that state and space of where you have experienced that trauma because it hasn't left you. And your life has been held back while everybody else is moving forward and you are at a standstill. So, I want to tell you and have this conversation about my sisters and I. And I love my sisters and I love them dearly because we come together, we've been coming together and having Sisters Day, and we will sit back and go, and we have went back to our conversations of things that had affected us. And not knowing sometimes of what somebody says to you or the way they say it, because I'm not going to discuss what we've had in sister time, but I am going to tell you sometimes we don't realize what we say to to individuals, especially our loved ones, our children, our siblings, and things of that nature, on how that can affect them going forward. It affects how they communicate with others. It affects their decisions, things that they do and how they do it because of the trauma that they experience. They are guarded a lot of times. They have their guard up because you're not sure if everyone else is going to respond to you in the same way. So I advise, and I would suggest rather, um, everyone to take the time, to first begin to work on healing from your own trauma that you have experienced, understanding the effect that it has had on you, and how, you know, how is it that you can be able to self care with what you've experienced? Because everyone's self care does not look the same, it looks different because what you experience, what you're going through, how you go through it, how it affects you is different. So therefore, the way you're going to self care is going to be different from everyone else. But it's so important, definitely, that as you self care, in order for you to self care, you have to be self aware to know what your needs are. What do you need to help you in the midst of your trauma and implementing, whether it's implementing boundaries, whether it's separation, whether it's, the coping mechanisms, being transparent in your communication. I always say to operate in truth and transparency is important for me because once again, that's part of my self-awareness is to make sure that I'm not shutting me out and I am aware, clearly aware of how I'm feeling and to communicate that to others. Some people may receive it. Some people sometimes think that I'm joking because I'm very clear about it. But I'm serious. It's the most serious thing that I could be. But I have to communicate those things because we all have some forms of triggers. But do we all understand or know what our triggers are? Do we all understand how to be able to implement coping mechanisms to be able to allow us to get a smooth transition from that trigger to continuing the process that we were in without no one else knowing but yourself? Um, and that's where the work comes in at the work of seeing a licensed therapist, going through the process, communicating, understanding. Um, and understanding your trauma too does not always mean that I just want to put this out here because sometimes, people think that they're looking for they're looking for closure sometimes. And closure from trauma it's not going to always look like what you might want it to look like because you may go to an individual and say, hey, I want to talk about the situation. I want to discuss what I went through. And that individual may decide that they're not ready to be truthful or honest, that they're not ready to have that conversation. Or in that conversation, they may still remain um, or still continue to try to traumatize you again or um, put you in another position. So you have to understand and be prepared before you have a conversation with anyone else to bring healing and closure or to what you have been through and have a clear understanding of that closure may not always look like what you are expecting. And what happens when you don't get the closure that you expect? How can you still be okay and not continue to carry that trauma on after you've had that conversation with that individual? So I definitely want you all to look at that, think about that, have conversations, make use your journal, document the things that you experience, the things that trigger you. Um, Look at the things that have been unresolved in your life. Who is it or what is it that has allowed you to be stuck at a standstill that still holds space in your mind, in your heart, in your emotions, um, that has affected you to keep you from moving forward and in having that life, that healthy, thriving, enjoyable life. What is it? And know that it is something that can be removed, but it is a process. It will take time. It doesn't happen overnight. Um, and your journey of healing, it is a lifetime. I always say to people that I am healed and healing. Am I completely healed? No, because in the midst of discovery of healing, we realize that in every level, every day, we're going to learn something new. We're going to discover that there is something else that is still there that we still need to heal from and learn from and be able to grow. So never think that once you go through one process of healing, that you are completely finished in your healing process. That's not the case. But you are on your road in your journey to healing. And that's a great and beautiful thing. It's a beautiful place to be when you can begin to be transparent that you can breathe better, that you know that you can have the conversations that you desire to have and not feel bound or go through the effects of the trauma, or when having someone having PTSD, can't sleep, the triggers, the constant memories of what they have experienced. When those things become lighter, I can't say that they will always disappear, but when they become lighter and you are able to transition from that trauma into that smooth conversation, and you are able to respond and not react, you will begin to see yourself differently and feel different because now you know that you are able to walk in your own truth, that you are able to communicate the things that you need to communicate in a healthy manner, and that you are able to implement boundaries within your life and not allow other people to break those boundaries, not even yourself. It is so important. There's to to know to know that it's okay. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say, I don't want to have that conversation right now. And not to allow someone to force you into a conversation or situation that you're not ready for. It's okay. But in the midst of all of that, and understanding that it's okay to be able to put those boundaries in place in your life, we have to also understand that even though as though we have boundaries, other people have boundaries. And as much as we want someone to respect our boundaries, we have to respect theirs as well. And it's okay. It is okay to respect those boundaries, but know how it is, how you can and cannot communicate with someone. It is very important to be aware as we are dealing with people. There are certain things that people are not ready for. Even though you may be ready for it, they are not ready for it. And sometimes they may be ready for it and you're not ready for it. But understanding and respecting that is so important. But just have those conversations first with yourself. Heal, go through that process. Journaling is one of the greatest things that you can do because it allows you to not only write out, to get out, to release what you're thinking, how you're feeling. It also allows you the opportunity to go back and revisit those things, to look at what happened during that period and why did that make you feel the way you feel. It allows you to begin to approach how you're feeling, what triggered you, how it triggered you, and begin the process of communicating these things with a therapist to be able to work through that process. It helps you see your progress. It allows you to see that you are healing from that you are moving forward, you are growing from where you were to being reactive to everything to now being able to have that conversation or not have that conversation to say, hey, not at this time. But it is a great way to see what you're doing and how you are growing. So definitely sit down, understand, um, self-awareness, self-advocacy, and self-care are important. trauma happens in many of our lives, and so many people have had many situations um, that has brought trauma. They have been traumatized on more than one occasion. And trauma, sometimes on top of trauma, is it becomes a little bit more difficult to deal with, especially if it has been something that has happened before you can even address the first trauma that you've experienced. So you can have a trauma, then it happens again, something happens again, and then all of that, it takes a lot. And trauma takes a big toll on our bodies. A lot of times trauma is not just, it doesn't just stick with being an emotional and psychological situation. Trauma can transpose over into physical dis-ease. The dis-ease brings on the disease. A lot of times people get sick and different ailments because they have had trauma and unresolved trauma to them. And the body will react to it. It really will. It will affect you. So many people have been hospitalized not to due to uh, physical trauma that has taken place to them, but due to the emotional and psychological trauma that has brought on diseases due to the trauma that they have experienced, and it's been unresolved. Your body holds on so much. The mind and the body works together, and a lot of times the mind is holding off to the body and telling the body it's not ready to deal with certain things. And when it happens, it can all flutter on you at one time. So I want you all, in the midst of all of this trauma, I want you to begin to enjoy life. Enjoy life, take it one day at a time. Never apologize for having to say no or having to step back and say what you're not ready for. Everyone has a time, a season for everything and everyone. But in the midst of all of that, I want you to remember to smile, be happy, work through, work through what you need to work through. Love on you, be honest with yourself for yourself, because your healing is not for anyone else but for you. And once you heal, then you can begin to really live and thrive, having a wonderful life. But you have to want it, and you have to get it for you, nobody else. A lot of times people want you to go through the process of healing so they can talk about, what it did for them or whatever, but that's for you. Just remember that. That's not for nobody else but for you. And don't let nobody make you feel guilty about it. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about your boundaries that you have implemented and whether they want to, respect them or not respect them. And sometimes you have to walk away for those individuals who do not want to respect your boundaries. And you have to say enough is enough. And sometimes you have two people who have those boundaries, and you may respect that person's boundaries, and they may not want to respect yours. But you have to understand, in that process, in that time, and at that point, you have to implement your right of choice. And that right of choice is whether you want to continue to deal with that person or not. And then become self aware of whether or not it is even healthy for you to continue to keep that person there in your space at that point of time that you're working on your healing. It just may not be conducive for you at that time. I remember years ago, the old folks used to have a saying, and they used to say, sometimes you have to love people from afar. And yes, and when you get older, you don't always understand all those analogies. But yeah, now you begin to understand. With loving people afar from, sometimes you can't always love everybody up close, but you definitely do have to love them from afar. Meaning, I love you, but at this point in time, you can't respect my space, and therefore in order for me to maintain my peace and my health, I have to deal with you from afar. And it's okay to do that. And sometimes you can come back and revisit that because then maybe that individual might have began to do some work for themselves. But the most important thing, healing is a journey. It's a selfish one, but it's a good one because it is for yourself first. You have to heal because you can't help somebody else in healing until you healed yourself. So definitely know that in this process, you got to love you. You got to heal on you. So I want to take this time. I know I've been talking for a moment. I just want to take this time once again to say if you have any questions, if there's something that you would like to ask, call in so that we can talk about it or send an email to info at Tabula Rasa dv.org, and we can begin to discuss some of your questions. Or at any time, send a message in. Let's have a conversation, keeping the topics going, understanding what it is that you may be dealing with or struggling with, or your family, your loved ones. Because so many of us, and let me go back and say this, because so many of us are going through some form of trauma. And even our children, young children, adult children, and sometimes we want to respond to them in our own manner. We want to say the things that we need to say to them, and then we want them to respond to us, but yet they're reacting to us from their own place and space of trauma. And sometimes it's okay to say to your children, you may want to talk to them about certain things and tell them or give them advice. And sometimes you have to realize that you just might not be the person that can help them. And that's real talk. You may not be the person that can help them, especially if there's unresolved trauma that they have with you, unresolved issues that they're having with you. You just might not be the one who can help them. They have to go somewhere else. And as much as you will want to give your input and be able to help them or give them a piece of guidance or wisdom, it just might not be received because their battle is still, they're still operating in that past trauma. So it's best sometimes to be able to be self-aware enough to know to say, hey, I'm not the person that can help you, but I could probably guide you and lead you to somebody else. But if that's the case, just know what your limits are with them, what you can and can't do. You be self-aware with that. Know that you don't want to engage yourself to be put into another situation or to even cause even more conflict in an area that is unresolved. Everyone has their own time of healing. It can't be forced. It can't be pushed upon. You can't push upon your thoughts and how you felt or feel on anyone else, but to give them their place and their space for when they are ready, not when you're ready, but when they are ready, giving them the opportunity to be able to come to you. So definitely, we want to know, and because this too, May is the month of mental health, mental health awareness and trauma awareness. And it's so important for us to understand that mental health and our traumas that we experience in life can keep us, it can hinder us, it can tear us down, it can tear up relationships with your loved ones, your children, your friends, and including yourself. Because trauma also causes some people to self sabotage where they don't think that they deserve to be happy. So therefore they do things in life or to themselves or to their situations that are there that can help them thrive, improve their lives, make them better, have a relationship, whether it be platonic, once again, or whether it be an intimate relationship. Sometimes they think they're just not deserving of it, and so they will sabotage it. They will sabotage the idea of them having gainful employment. It was self sabotage themselves of being able to move on. So mental health is so important. It is not just one thing that makes an individual in a place or space where they can't communicate or where their communication is unhealthy. There's several things that are taking place. And we definitely want to make sure that when we communicate, that you communicate from a point of really listening to people, really hearing what they're saying, and not what you want to communicate, but what they are saying. And I say this so much because these are things that I have to also remind myself of every day in our conversations, because we have to really listen to what people are saying and know that the conversation that you might want to have, it may not be the time. And wait for the time for that conversation. Let them be ready. You know, they will let you know. You the opportunity will present itself again, but you just have to be willing to allow that process and allow that to happen and take place. So, in the midst of all of that, I just say to you all, take the time to journal, to understand the traumas and the effects of the trauma that you have had and the traumas that you may have or may not have had, or someone else that you are dealing with, to understand where they are, their place in your space of their trauma, and how they communicate, or rather how they may need to communicate, as well as you, how you may need to communicate with someone. And also be self aware to know when you need to walk away, when you need to step back, or just be quiet. You know, sometimes quietness is not just that you don't have anything to say, it's really that you're listening and being mindful in what you do say. And for us all, in all we do, instead of us reacting, for us to respond in a more positive and impactful way. Because people are dealing with some real issues this day in life. And in, a lot of times, some people don't know how to communicate their emotions or the things that they went through. And I'm not saying that that is your fault, that is your problem, because they don't, and that they don't know how to take things. But we do have to know to handle people with care, because we will want someone to handle us with care as well. So I conclude that, and definitely, I want to say this before I leave. This is National Smile Month, so I want you all to remember to smile and don't stop smiling, to learn from life and grow better. That's all we can do is grow better, make better decisions, be aware, and be willing to make changes of ourselves to be a better person, a better self for us and for other people. Because we have many of people that, whether we are directly or indirectly influencing, we are influencing someone, whether it be our children, our friends, our neighbors, the people who see us. We are making an impact everywhere. And it could be a good impact or it could be a bad one. It could be a positive or it could be a negative. So, once again, I am Ava Love, and thank you for joining us at With Pain to Power. And to remember to turn your pain into your power, because you have the power to do so. And that power lies in your choice. So choose what you're going to do. And remember, in all things that you do, It's to love, be happy, do better, smile, and grow better.